Hey everyone, welcome back to part 4 of the Larcset Transceiver build series. If you've been following along from part 1 to part 3, you've already come a long way, and in this video, we are getting into one of the most exciting stages, the transmitter driver and the power amplifier. This is where your radio really starts to come alive, so take your time, follow along carefully, and I'll walk you through everything step by step as I replicate the process with you. Let's get started. Alright, first up, we're working on the transmitter driver section. We begin by preparing the inductors. Take two pieces of enameled wire, each about 7 inches long. These are going to become L6 and L7. Now grab your black FT37-43 toroid core. Carefully wind 10 turns on each core. Try to keep the turns neat and evenly spaced. It really helps with consistent performance. Once both inductors are wound, scrape off the enamel from the ends of the wires. This step is important. If you don't remove the enamel properly, your solder joints won't conduct. After scraping, tin the pigtails with a bit of solder so they're ready to go onto the board. Now go ahead and solder L6 and L7 into their respective positions on the PCB. Take a moment here to double check alignment and solder quality. Solid joints now save troubleshooting later. Next, we move on to the transistors. You will be installing Q19 and Q13, both 2 and 3905 transistors. These are through-hole components, so insert them carefully into the board. Pay attention to orientation. The flat side of each transistor should face away from the rear edge of the board. Once they're seated properly, solder them in place. Now, we install the PA bias trimmer. This is the small blue adjustable component. Place it in its designated spot and solder it carefully. After soldering, take a screwdriver and turn it fully clockwise. This sets the initial bias condition, which we'll fine-tune later. At this point, your transmitter driver section should be fully assembled. Take a quick look over everything. Inductors secure, transistors aligned correctly, and clean solder joints all around. Now we move on to the power amplifier stage. This is where your signal gets boosted for transmission. The main component here is the IRF510 transistor, along with its heatsink. Start by attaching the IRF510 to the heatsink using the supplied A3 screw. Make sure it's firmly tightened so heat can transfer effectively, but don't overdo it. If you tighten too much, you risk cracking the transistor case, which would damage the component. Once the IRF510 is securely mounted, Insert it into the PCB and solder it in place. Important: always install the heatsink before soldering the transistor. Trying to add it afterward can stress the leads or damage the board. Next, we'll work on the output filter inductors, L4 and L5. These two have slightly different values, so it's best to build and install them one at a time instead of mixing them up. Let's start with L4. Take a 12-inch piece of enameled wire and wind 19 turns onto one of the yellow T30-6 toroids. Keep the winding tight and consistent. Once done, scrape off the enamel from the ends and tin the leads. Now insert this inductor into the L4 position. This one is located away from the board's edge. Solder it in place and make sure it sits nicely without stress on the leads. Now for L5, take another 12-inch wire and wind 17 turns onto the remaining yellow T36 toroid. Again, scrape the enamel, tin the leads, and then install it into the L5 position. This is the footprint closer to the edge of the board. Solder it carefully, ensuring good contact and a stable fit, and that's it, your power amplifier stage is complete. Alright, moving on, the kit also includes a few extra components like Berg pin headers, spaces, a microphone element, and a push button switch for PTT. So let's quickly assemble those as well. First up, the Berg pin headers. I'm going to go ahead and solder them directly into the header pin holes on the PCB. This step is totally optional. Next, grab the spacers and nuts. We'll mount them onto the four corners of the PCB. This helps in giving the board some elevation and makes it easier to mount inside a case later on. Now for the interesting part, I've built a small PTT microphone unit using the provided microphone element and the push button switch. For better flexibility, I decided to use a separate small enclosure along with an additional audio socket. This way, I can connect it using a flexible aux cable instead of fixed wires, which makes it much more convenient to use. Let me give you a quick peek inside the PTT mic case. As you can see, it's compact, simple, and does exactly what it's supposed to do. The wiring is pretty straightforward. The ring connection is for PTT, the tip is for the microphone, and the sleeve is ground. Overall, it's a small and handy unit that serves the purpose really well. With this, you've completed the full assembly of the Larcset transceiver. In the next video, we'll move on to testing, calibration, and getting this radio on air. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing and let me know in the comments how your build is going or if you ran into any issues. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.